Of course, he had to ruin my favorite coffee shop routine, Evan muttered under his breath, glaring at the tall stranger sprawled across the counter like he owned the place. Because who needs peace before 8 a.m., right? Blake didn't even glance up. His dark eyes were fixed on the steam curling from his cup, but his smirk betrayed him knew Evan was watching. Knew Evan's pulse had betrayed him the moment he walked in. The irony was delicious. The tall, broad-shouldered alpha, always so confident, yet clearly aware that Evan's beta instincts were in overdrive. Evan's hands tightened around his own mug, the warmth doing nothing to settle the storm in his chest. He wanted to tell Blake to get lost, to leave him alone, but his body betrayed his mind. One glance at that half-smile, the way Blake's shadowed eyes could pierce straight into him, and suddenly all his careful boundaries seemed laughably fragile. It had started 3 weeks ago, a seemingly innocent interaction in the corner of the local bookstore. Blake had knocked over a stack of vintage paperbacks, and Evan, always too polite, too cautious, had helped him pick them up. But Blake's laugh, low and teasing, had lodged itself in Evan's chest like a splinter he didn't want to remove. From that moment, nothing had been normal. Now, as Blake leaned slightly toward him, pretending to reach for the sugar, Evan caught the scent of him clean musk mingled with something uniquely Blake and felt his knees weaken. He hated it. Absolutely hated it. Are you always this grumpy before coffee? Or is it a special talent? Blake asked finally, teasing, the corners of his mouth tilting into a mischievous grin. Maybe I save it for people who irritate me on purpose. Evan shot back, though his voice lacked conviction. Part of him longed to lean in closer, to feel the heat of Blake's arm brushing against his, but he kept his posture rigid. Blake chuckled softly, low and warm, and it was almost enough to undo him right there. You have no idea how effective that is. The tension between them had been building for weeks, unspoken and electric. Evan, the beta, had been trained socially, biologicalito avoid letting himself get caught in the alpha's gravitational pull. But Blake was relentless. He seemed to understand exactly how to push Evan's buttons without breaking him, and yet every touch, every word carried a weight that Evan couldn't ignore. After what felt like an eternity, Blake finally straightened, tipping his coffee cup just slightly in a mock salute. I guess I should leave you to your misery, he said, but the warmth in his eyes betrayed him. Until next time, beta. Evan watched him go, a swirl of frustration, longing, and something unidentifiably tender twisting in his chest. He knew he should hate Blake for how easily he could manipulate his emotions. And yet, later that evening, Evan found himself walking past the same quiet street where Blake lived. It was impulsive, reckless even, but he couldn't help it. The town's soft streetlights flickered, illuminating the faint mist of a cool spring night, and there Blake was, leaning against the brick wall of his apartment building, cigarette in hand. You couldn't stay away, could you? Blake's voice was smooth, teasing, but under it lay something softer, almost vulnerable. Evan swallowed, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. The scent of Blake was intoxicating, mixed with the faint smoke and the night air. Maybe I didn't want to, he admitted, surprising even himself. Blake's smirk softened into a genuine smile, rare and fleeting, but enough to make Evan's chest ache. Good, he said simply, dropping the cigarette to the ground and crushing it under his boot. Because I've been thinking about you all day. About this. About us. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Evan's breath caught. Every beta instinct screamed caution, but his heart betrayed him, hammering in sync with the unspoken promise in Blake's dark eyes. Slowly, almost cautiously, Evan stepped closer. Their proximity was a wildfire contained, hearts racing, hands twitching with the need to bridge the gap. Blake's hand hovered near Evan's. A question, a dare, a promise all at once. And when their fingers finally brushed, sparks shot through Evan like electricity, igniting a storm he had no desire to resist. Blake, Evan started, but the words faltered, unnecessary in the silence that wrapped them. The night embraced them, private and infinite, as if the world itself had paused to witness this fragile, intense connection. Blake leaned just slightly closer, his forehead brushing Evan's. "Shoo!" he murmured, lips near Evan's ear. "No words. Not yet." Evan closed his eyes, letting himself feel the warmth, the tension, the intimacy, the thrill of something forbidden yet inevitable. In that small, quiet street under the amber glow of the streetlights, the Alpha and Beta finally found a moment of fragile peace, a prelude to the storm that their hearts had been warning them about for weeks. Days passed in a tense blur. Evan couldn't focus on work, couldn't stop replaying Blake's touch, his whispered, "Shoo." The way the world had seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. Every time his phone buzzed, he half expected a message from Blake, something teasing or intimate, something that would unravel him completely. Then one evening, the storm came both literal and emotional. Thunder rattled the windows of Evan's apartment, rain hammering the streets outside, while inside, a confrontation neither of them could avoid finally ignited. Blake appeared at his door, soaked, dark hair plastered to his forehead, eyes smoldering. "We need to talk," he said, voice rough, carrying the weight of unspoken tension. Evan's chest tightened. "About what?" His words sounded smaller than intended, brittle against the roar of the storm. "About us," Blake said simply, stepping closer. The rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the floor, but Evan barely noticed. It was the closeness, the heat radiating from Blake, the dangerous, intoxicating pull of him that made Evan's hands shake. "You think I don't care about the consequences?" Evan's voice finally broke, raw and desperate. I've never felt this way about anyone. I'm terrified." Blake's expression softened, something almost tender slipping through his usual confident mask. "Evan, being terrified means you care. It means it's real. You don't have to pretend with me." Tears welled in Evan's eyes. He hated how vulnerable he felt, hated that Blake could make him feel both terrified and safe at the same time. But the truth was undeniable. He wanted Blake. He had always wanted him. Blake reached out, cupping Evan's face gently. The storm outside faded into a distant background as the moment stretched, fragile and eternal. "I'm not going anywhere," Blake whispered. "You don't have to be strong alone anymore. We'll face this, together." Evan closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned into Blake's touch. The fear, the uncertainty, the beta instincts that had kept him cautious, all of it melted away in the warmth of Blake's embrace. They stayed like that for a long while, breathing together, hearts sinking in an unspoken rhythm. The rain continued to fall, tapping against the windows like a private applause for their confession, their surrender to something undeniable, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks. When they finally pulled back slightly, Blake's eyes glimmered with a softness Evan hadn't seen before. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, almost shyly, and for the first time, Evan didn't hesitate. Their lips met in a careful, hesitant brush at first, then with growing urgency, the storm outside echoing the storm inside them. Fingers tangled in hair and jackets, breaths mingled, hearts pounding in a chaotic symphony of desire and relief. In that kiss, months of longing, teasing, and unspoken tension exploded, leaving them breathless and laughing, clinging to each other like it was the only thing keeping the world steady. Hours passed unnoticed. They talked, whispered, held each other through the night, sharing secrets, fears, and dreams. For the first time, Evan realized that love didn't have to be painful to be real. It could be chaotic, intense, and terrifying and still make your heart feel like it was finally home. Weeks turned into months, and the small town in America became their sanctuary. They learned each other's rhythms, the quiet ways of giving comfort, the playful teasing that made ordinary days feel extraordinary. Blake still had his teasing smirk. Evan still had his beta anxieties. But together, they balanced, protected, and cherished one another. It wasn't always perfect. Sometimes arguments flared. Sometimes old fears resurfaced, but every time, they found their way back, stronger and more in sync than before. Their love was a fire that burned bright, sometimes fiercely, sometimes softly, but always with warmth, passion, and unwavering loyalty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Evan leaned against Blake, hands entwined. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he murmured, voice soft, full of wonder. Blake rested his head against Evan's shoulder, a rare vulnerability showing in his eyes. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But now I can't imagine my life without you." They stood there in silence, hearts beating in quiet harmony, watching the last light of the day fade into night. In that small, ordinary moment, they discovered the extraordinary. That love, in all its intensity, tenderness, and occasional chaos, could heal, ignite, and transform. And most importantly, that they were no longer alone in facing the world. For Evan and Blake, the storm had passed. The chaos of longing and fear had given way to warmth, intimacy, and a love that would endure, fierce and unyielding, through all of life's storms. And as they held each other close, the town around them seemed to hum in quiet approval, a testament to a love that had survived, thrived, and finally found its home. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.